Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, where the veil between the known and the unknown is lifted, one story at a time. I welcome you and all listeners to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat, and I hope you find tonight's subject and reports interesting. Before we go any further, I do want to mention, and many of you probably know, the Phantoms and Monsters blog site kind of disintegrated on me this week. I was trying to do an upgrade, and the old blogger code couldn't handle the upgrade, and I just lost everything. So, unfortunately, I couldn't get it back. I did do a backup, but I'm basically going to have the site rebuilt. So it's going to take about 3 to 4 weeks. But it's going to be bigger and better than ever. There's going to be a lot of bells and whistles on there that I haven't had before. And it should be a lot smoother. Now, that being said, this coming Wednesday, I'm going to go ahead and do an Ask Lon members chat presentation, 9 o'clock Wednesday night. So we're going to start trying to do that on a monthly basis again. So if you are a member of the channel, you can log into that and just come on there and you'll be able to access that. And I'll answer questions about anything that's on your mind. So if you want to join, just go to the Phantoms and Monsters Radio YouTube site. $2.99 a month, and you get all access to that. Plus, when we get the site built and everything else going, we're going to have a few things that are going to be added into the perks for being on the being a member of the Phantoms and Monsters Radio Insiders group. So tonight we're going to talk about reptilians. For centuries, hundreds of serpent-like beings have slithered through the undercurrents of myth, folklore, and ancient history. From the Nagas of India to the scaled deities carved into the Mesoamerican temples, humanity has long whispered about reptilian entities that dwell just beyond our perception. But what if these aren't just symbols or myths? What if these beings are real and some of them are walking among us? Tonight's show, we crack open the lid on one of the most unnerving aspects of modern high strangeness, the reptilian humanoid phenomenon. Now, often described as cold blooded, intelligent, and deeply manipulative, these entities have been implicated in countless abduction cases, government conspiracy claims, and eyewitness accounts that point to horrifying shapeshifting abilities. Now, witnesses have often reported their abductions as emotionally traumatic, with memories of underground bases, surgical experimentation, and a psychic control that lingers long after the encounter ends. Now, while skeptics may brush off the idea of science fiction gone rogue, the sheer consistency in descriptions across cultures, periods, and personal testimonies deserves deeper consideration. Now, are these beings ancient intruders from another dimension or biological engineered watchers hiding behind a mask of human normalcy? Well, many experiencers claim these entities can shift forms at will, slipping between human and reptilian guises with terrifying ease. So, we will explore the chilling reports of individuals who claim to have seen these beings with their own eyes, whether in a corporate boardroom, in a shadowy abduction scenario, or even in moments of spiritual and psychedelic awakening. Tonight, we're not just asking if reptilian humanoids exist, we're digging into the why. Why are they here? What do they want? And most importantly, who or what is pulling the strings behind the veil? But before I go into this any further, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our programming. If you're watching us on YouTube, Super Chat and Super Thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. Other donation links are also shown in the description, so thanks for your consideration. Now, your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you find interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to again thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike. Also want to thank Kevin and Mary at ESP. So now if you're in the chat and you have a question, please use all caps. I'll try to get to each one of them after the presentation. So this first encounter, first witness report, was sent to me a little while ago. And he states, "Hello, I would like to tell you about an experience I had in 1954 while working with the U.S. Naval Engineers at Zaragoza Air Base near Zaragoza, Spain. This was to be a refurbished NATO facilities. I was a contractor, 24 years old, working at my father's construction firm and was hired by the DoD. This was my first time away from the United States. I had another fellow with me who had worked for my father for a couple of years. Only a few people knew of my experience, my wife, who is deceased, and two close friends who have also passed away. I have read some of the stories of other people you have published. I thought that I could add my story to the record. Now, after I had been in Spain for several weeks, I decided to take in the surroundings. I was told by some of the locals that Monasterio di Piedra near Nevalis would be an excellent place to visit. The monastery was about 60 miles away, so I decided it would be an enjoyable day trip. Now, when I arrived, I met a young lady who offered to show me around the complex. It was a very hot day, early August, so we took numerous breaks along the way. Now, as the afternoon waned and the early evening approached, it was time for me to head back towards Zaragoza. The young lady mentioned that there was a very nice inn not far from the monastery if I wanted to stay the night, then get an early start in the morning. So I decided to stay the night and maybe do some exploring that evening. Now, the inn was very rustic, though quite comfortable. I had dinner outside on the back patio. It was an excellent evening. Though it was dusk, I could still see the terrain not far from the inn. There was a vineyard and a small lavender meadow behind the inn, which led to a series of rocky outcrops. I thought that I would take a look around, but I first asked the owner if it was okay to do so. I walked through the vineyard and reached a small pond which had a loud chorus of frogs. By this time, it was dark, but there was a fair amount of available moonlight, and I still needed a flashlight to see where I was going. I walked around the pond and started to cross a small bridge over a narrow stream. Now, as I walked over the bridge, I noticed something running through the water about 50 foot upstream. There was enough moonlight to where I could make out an upright shape. Now, this thing was heading toward the high rocks, though I lost sight of it. I stood silent for about 5 minutes. It was eerie because the frogs were now quiet. The only sound was coming from the direction of the rocks, and the noise was very strange. It sounded like a guttural yak, yak, yak series that would pause for a few seconds and repeat. It would also fade in and out. And after a few minutes, it stopped. I had no idea what it was. I crossed the bridge and started to slowly approach the rocks. Now, as I came to the rock face, there was a very well-worn trail on the ground along the edge. I walked further until I reached an opening on the rock face. I pointed the flashlight inside and saw that it was a grotto about 15 feet deep, high enough for me to stand in. The floor of the grotto was littered with small animal bones, so I figured that there were predators around, most likely a fox. I continued on the trail until I heard the yak, yak, yak sound again, and it was very close. I instantly stopped walking and started searching around me with the flashlight. Just then, some gravel landed on me, and the loud yak, yak, yak sound was coming from above me. I quickly looked up and pointed the flashlight. There was a creature standing on the small ledge about 15 foot away, staring at me with yellow eyes reflecting. It was screaming yak, yak, yak in quick, constant rhythm. This was the gaseous thing I'd ever witnessed. It was standing on two legs and was about 4 to 5 foot tall. I read about reptilian encounters on your blog. Well, I think this may have been one. It was dark in color and had arms like a human. The face looked like that of a lizard resembling that of an iguana. After a few seconds, it leaped off the ledge onto the trail, swiftly running on two legs in the opposite direction. It was then that I noticed a long tail as it moved away from me. I quickly made my way back toward the inn and directly to my room. I lay in bed thinking about this creature the entire night. I was terrified to look out my window, fearing that it would follow me back to the inn. Early in the morning, I checked out and drove back to Saragossa. I have no proof of my experience other than my word, but I now believe that this was a reptilian humanoid. Now, this next account, I think, came from Albert Rosales. It happened in Vyborg, Russia in the summer of 1999. A 32-year-old Maria was found barely alive, naked, and injured on the highway outside of St. Petersburg. She was taken to the hospital where she was found that she had several and numerous cuts, bruises, and other injuries. After an initial investigation, the local militia concluded she had been assaulted. There was a strange detail present. The lower part of her body was covered in an unknown substance resembling mucus or frog spawn. When she regained consciousness, she reported that she had been staying with some friends at a country cottage when one day she decided to take a motorboat into the Bay of Finland. She wanted to look at an island which had the ruins of a former Finnish glass plant abandoned in 1939. Suddenly, a dense cloud covered the sky, and she looked up and saw a huge dish-shaped craft. She felt paralyzed with fear and unable to move. As the huge flying saucer hovered over her, she lost consciousness. She does not recall how long she had been unconscious, but she woke up feeling cold and fearful. She opened her eyes and found herself lying on a metallic table, completely naked. She was not tied and was not able to move. She was not tied and was able to move, but soon noticed a bizarre creature leaning over her. The creature was lizard-like with huge eyes. She saw many shiny instruments around her, and 3 or 4 lights shone over her. Suddenly, she felt the creature climb over her, touching her. She felt like screaming, but her throat did not obey her. She felt everything. She soon lost consciousness. She regained consciousness in the hospital 200 kilometers away from where she had originally been. Her boat was found on an island. The mucus or like substance proved difficult to wash away from her body. And that's the end of the account. And that did come from Albert Rosales. It was a report that was made in a militia hospital by some of the staff. Now, the following incident occurred in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, in January 1999 during the late night. Eva Trent had fallen asleep when she awoke to a buzzing sound. This was also supplied to me by Albert Rosales. Opening her eyes, she was horrified to find two strange creatures standing on either side of her bed. The entity to her right was about 7 to 8 foot tall, weighing about 300 pounds, had apparently no clothing, and seemed to have either crocodile or snake-like skin. The creature to her left was identical in appearance, but smaller in height and weight. They seemed to be communicating in a chirping manner. Each of the entity's eyes glowed. Ava quickly discovered she was unable to move. And as she stared at the two creatures, she found that either one or both were giving her instructions telepathically. The nature of this was seemingly for her to create mental visual scenes of various kinds, and then they proceeded to distort the particular pleasant scene perversely. The creatures were intent not only to observe her emotional reaction, but also possibly to feed off the energy that was produced. Now, after a while, Ava began to mentally resist the mind manipulation and began to pray earnestly. A short time later, she fell back to sleep. The next morning, the witness found 5 of her music tapes grossly distorted as if extreme heat had been applied. However, no evidence of a fire or odor was present. Now, I received the following account after I interviewed with a Swiss podcaster several years ago. The abduction experience, the date was year 2000 or 2001. They can't pinpoint it precisely, but it was the witnesses or the experiencer was in their early 20s, and they were born in 1977. The location was the city of Lausanne, which is in Switzerland at the edge of Lake Geneva. Happened 3 nights in a row, and then never again. That they remember anyway. So she states, I was in nursing school at the time, renting a small room in a tower-like school building next to the CHUV, the University Hospital of Lausanne. On a personal level, I wasn't doing very good. I was struggling with a problem of bulimia and anorexia. I would have a binge eating crisis every evening, and if for whatever reason I couldn't, I'd go into a panic mode, much like a junkie. But one evening, though, while in my room, I became aware the compulsion wasn't there. It was simply gone. That was startling and very empowering. I could feel that something was different in the air, besides the fact without being able to say what. Eventually, it was time to go to bed, which I did. As I recall, as soon as I laid my head on the pillow, without going into the phase of getting asleep, I felt myself being powerfully sucked backwards extremely quickly with a strong vertigo feeling in my stomach. Next, I was aware of being in a circular, dim-lit room with several rectangular doors, or what felt like doors, along the curved wall. Unfortunately, I couldn't describe the environment more precisely than that. The type of materials, how were the doors exactly, the wall, I don't remember. I will say, though, that it didn't feel like I was inside a craft. That's about what I can say about the environment. I was aware of lying on my back with a heavy weight on my chest. I felt feeling afraid, but not panicked. I began feeling anger because I wanted to stand up and couldn't. I was able to move my limbs freely and began struggling mightily to try to get up. I thought to myself, gee, I'm struggling as much as that. When I open my eyes in my bed, I'll see the mess I'm making. I knew that I was in two places at the same time. I had the awareness of being in that room and to still be lying in my bed. I was convinced that the movements I was making in that room or on my body was making them in my bed as well. I think this is what's called bilocation. I was aware of the presence of one or more beings, responsible for the weight I was feeling on my chest. I didn't have the feeling of an entity was literally sitting on my chest, though I don't remember either the number of beings or how they looked. To the most, something that I could say would be color, brownish. But about their shape, height, and other details, it's not in my memory. I don't remember what might have happened further in that circular room. What I do remember next is opening my eyes in my bedroom, utterly shocked to find myself laying fine in my undisturbed bed. The fact was even more shocking to me than the rest of the experience. I spent the next day at school trying to understand just what had happened. I knew it was not a dream. It felt completely different. At the time, I had next to zero awareness of ETs or aliens, zero awareness of abductions. It was making sense to me that we humans were not the only sentient beings or species out there. But that was about it at the time. Now, in the evening of that second day, I got the sensation that the experience would happen again. I was feeling somewhat afraid, but again, strangely not panicked or terrorized. When I went to the bed, I laid my head on the pillow and it happened again. I thought to myself, oh no, while feeling the sucking backward phenomena. And the same scenario repeated. It was in the same place, lying on my back, same weight on my chest, again, unable to free myself and stand up. The next thing I remember is like the night prior, I opened my eyes in my bedroom, not recalling anything more of what had happened in the circular room. Now, on the third day, I was feeling fed up. I was mentally preparing for being able this time to stand up. I was going to show them. I was anticipating the night and reoccurrence of the experiences. So when it did happen again, I was satisfied and all pumped up. However, the same scenario repeated, and I was unable to stand up in the circular room. I prepared for a fourth occurrence, but it never happened. It never happened again since. On the fifth or sixth day, my eating compulsion came back and my bulimia anorexia problem resumed. Now, she did say later that since then I read on the internet that those instances of feeling a weight on the chest are often linked with an assault scenario by reptilians. And I've heard this before. To what kind of assault? I mean, she never really went into detail. But she did tell me that it never happened again, and she doesn't really remember all of the experience, but she doesn't think she was assaulted badly. So anyway, this next one's are as if some of these aren't weird enough. This is a really weird one. So the witness contacted me and stated, "Hi, I had an encounter in 2014 that I still can't explain at Colossal Con in Sandusky, Ohio. I wasn't drunk or anything. I haven't drunk a drop of alcohol my whole life. But what happened that night at Colossal Con, I'll never be able to shake it. It was my first year at the convention. It was late, probably around 2:30 a.m. I was walking to my car to get some last-minute toiletries I'd forgotten to bring into the room earlier. I'm sure you've done the same. The place was mostly dead at that hour, a few late-night stragglers here or there, but nothing unusual. The lights from the water park dimmed as I walked toward the parking lot, casting long shadows that I felt a little off, almost like the light wasn't reaching certain spots of the path. But I shrugged it off. It was late, and my mind was tired. I made my way to my car, parked further down by the tree line. It was the only space left. When I opened the car door, I was hit with that cool, still air. The kind that always makes you feel like a little too quiet at night. I grabbed what I needed and was about to head back inside when I heard something. At first, it was just a low rustling, like leaves or branches moving. I thought it was a raccoon or something, probably rummaging for food, but then I heard it again. Closer. It wasn't like an animal, it was too powerful, and the sound of something walking on two legs. I froze. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the woods. I didn't think much of it at first because there were a lot of people cosplaying as creepy creatures during the convention, but then I saw it. Standing just outside the tree line was a figure. It was tall, way taller than a human, at least 7 foot. It was covered in dark, slick scales that shimmered faintly in the dim light. It moved like it was too comfortable in its own body. Its arms were long and thin, ending in claws that looked almost too sharp. The eyes, well, damn the eyes, they glowed red, like I was looking into two burning coals. And the smile it had, it wasn't an I'm cosplaying a monster kind of smile. It was wide, too wide, like it wasn't supposed to have a smile at all. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It looked right at me, through me, like it knew everything I'd ever Googled. Then it hissed and opened its mouth just enough for this weird clicking growl to come out, like a death rattle mixed with a modern booting up. I couldn't respond. I was too stunned. My brain couldn't catch up to what was happening. And that's when it got even worse. This thing didn't just stay still. It started moving, slowly, deliberately, like it was enjoying my discomfort. But it wasn't just moving. Oh no, it was performing. And not in any way that made any sense. Out of nowhere, this giant reptilian thing started doing an anime dance. Yeah, an anime dance. You know, like the ones you'd seen on those viral videos, like the stupid catchy pon 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 moves. This creature was doing one of those dances perfectly. It was mocking me, copying some viral choreography like it was the most natural thing in the world. It had no business knowing what anime dances were, much less doing them. Its movements were fluid, eerie, and inhuman, but it nailed every awkward little flourish right down to the exaggerated hand gestures and the jarring head bobbing. I stood there absolutely dumbfounded. After it finished the dance, each move unnervingly perfect, exaggerated, mocking, it struck a final pose. It held its finger in a peace sign, one leg kicked up midair like an anime idol, and that awful grin never left its face. My heart was racing. I didn't know what to do. My friend, yeah, I had someone with me that night. Thank God he was just as frozen as I was. He didn't even speak for a few minutes. He just stood there wide-eyed looking between me and this thing. Finally, he whispered, "We need to get the hell out of here." Then it spoke. Not in a voice a human should have, a crackling voice that rattled down my spine. My friend and I didn't say a word. We just turned and ran full sprint, and it didn't look back, our faces pale, our hearts thudding, our feet barely touching the pavement. When we got back to the room, we locked the door, closed the curtains, and didn't speak for an hour. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a prank. Something else was out there that night. We never spoke about it again to anyone. Who would believe us? We were just a couple of nerds at a convention. I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. Well, I'll tell you, that was no doubt one of the strangest reptilian encounters that ever came my way or that I've ever read. I wonder what your thoughts on it. So when we get into the questions, maybe you can comment on that. This next witness stated, I'd experienced a situation back in the 1970s when I was a lot younger and I was with an older man, a friend, and some other people I knew, his son and daughter. And we took a little trip up to Portland, Oregon. And at that time, I didn't know what I was going to experience, and we stopped off at the back of some buildings in that area. I'm not sure exactly where, but what happened was we all got out of the car and walked up to the back end of this large building. We stood in the rear end of this place and saw rows and rows of these metal little chairs for people to sit on. And there were about 100 people in front of us. It was a long building inside, and it was night. So, anyway, we sat down, looked around, and we didn't know who was in front of us. And I noticed like 8 or 9 guys, like, in suits and like black jackets and black pants, like a dress type suit and pants. And they were all dressed the same. I asked, who was this? Or what was this? I didn't know what was going on. Are these FBI guys or what? So I sat for a little bit. I didn't want to take too much time. It was about midnight, so I proceeded to go by myself and leave the 3 people I was with and walk on up right where these few fellows were all standing. I stood next to one on the left side, and there was a whole row of them. So they were all together, and I stood there for a little bit, and I just had this odd feeling. Out of my side vision or peripheral vision or side vision, whatever, there was just something odd about this guy I was standing next to. And then the color, I could tell there was something wrong with the color of his skin on his face. I thought maybe the guy's been in a fire or something. There was something wrong with this situation. I kept looking forward. I kept looking straight ahead. And plus, these guys were all tall, unusually tall. So I eventually decided to go ahead and turn my head and look at this person. And to my shock, I noticed the side of his neck had this gray color. It wasn't natural skin color. It wasn't green. He had like small scales on his skin. It was really odd. I turned to look up at his face because he was a lot taller than I, about 7 foot tall, and I was looking at him at the lower part of his neck. I stood up to his face on the side of his head, and he was looking straight ahead and not looking at me at first. Then he started to turn his head. It would have been in segments, little movements at a time, and each time his face would move, it became more visible, his face. So it would almost become translucent. It was odd. Only his head. Of course, he was wearing clothes. Anyway, suddenly he tilted his head and looked at me with a look that wasn't too happy with me, looking at him directly. I'm looking into a face like what they call a reptilian, but not green-skinned ones. From what I know about Men in Black, from what I see on TV, they never look like a reptilian-like creature, This one never spoke to me. I was scared to death after I saw what it was. I wonder if it had claws, I thought I was standing too close to it and didn't want to. I was standing right next to it, and it was bigger than me. When I looked at it, it had gold eyes, big red gold eyes. And it had an unusual face. The mouth, nose, and the front of its face were really unusual. It was more of a reptile-like thing, and the nose was really something. It was flat, kind of looking, just bizarre. And its eyes were big, and they were gold, beautiful gold, but with a vertical slit. The eye had a pupil like a cat or an alligator. I just started walking ahead of it. I didn't want it standing next to me any further. And eventually I just went back to the people I was with. And I asked, can you see those guys up there? Can you see those guys in suits? They all said yes, they could. I wasn't imagining it. They kept saying yes, they could see them. This next witness states, hi there. I live in the capital of Australia, Canberra. My friend witnessed something pretty intense, and I was on the phone while it happened. So I heard it and heard him, and he's never prone to displays of hysteria, but is freaked out by this encounter. He was walking by the stormwater drains about 100 meters from his house, and he caught sight of a child-sized 3 foot tall or so black-scaled reptilian humanoid creature. He described it as having long fingers and bright cat eyes when they caught the light. It followed him home and climbed over the fence after him. It was studying him and not behaving particularly aggressive or hostile. It walked on 4 or 2 legs. He shooted away with an umbrella, very British of him, and I know, which is why when I heard it make a high-pitched hiss growl and take off. We wish to make an expedition to locate and take film of these adults, but we do need help. But questions remain. Armed or not, night vision, torches, EMF, provisions, maps of tunnels, inform someone in case we get lost, fluorescent chalk markers for trail signs with black lights for picking them up. We need to know about them. Details. Is there anyone in Canberra who can add a professional touch to our survival rate? Any advice on the subject would be very much appreciated. And have we forgotten anything about our equipment? Thanks. So I inquired. I don't know if they thought I lived in Canberra or not, but I received the following reply because I was wondering what was going on. And I asked where they had exactly where they lived at, and I got the answer. It's in Gordon, a suburb of Canberra. About 100 meters away from the house is a stormwater drain with underground access. It's on the same street as the local shops. The incident occurred about midnight. My friend tried to communicate with the creature at my behest. It stared at him while standing upright. Then, when he stepped toward it, ran. Over the 5-foot fence, it had reptilian humanoid features. The tunnel system under Canberra is very extensive, covers most of the underground, all leading to rivers or lakes. Don't know what else to tell you. Well, I didn't get back to him. I don't know what they were planning to do. The only thing I did say was I would second guess going back out after him. So what do you think? Do you think the group was ready for an expedition? I don't think so, but I'm interested in what you think. So a reader contacted me about their reptilian encounter and abduction while driving in rural Appalachia in Virginia. They also provided a rough sketch of the beings. Now, this is the information that was forwarded to me. Hello. My abduction happened 17 years ago in rural Southwest Virginia in 2007. I don't remember it like a real memory, but it was not a dream. I was driving home from a friend's house when it happened. I can remember vaguely what they looked like and a few other things. When my memory kicks in, I'm sitting outside the car on the side of the road. I have never told the police, and I never plan to. I don't want to be laughed at or put in the nut house. I have wanted to do this to get this off my chest for a long time. Anyway, the aliens I remember as looking rather reptilian. They weren't your cliche big heads and gray skin, but they were bipedal. Their craft I don't rightly remember, apart from the inside being very smooth and very bright above me. It is scary to think about, but I do remember a few things they did to me. I wore a mask of some type, and they pulled hair samples. There was a slight buzzing, I recall, on the thing over the top of my head. There were several of them. When I woke up, I was fully clothed beside my car on the same road I was traveling on when I last remembered. I had no scars or puncture marks, so I don't think they injected me with anything. Their appearance was the most frightening thing about it. How foreign they looked, but still, how they were somewhat familiar to something I had seen. It was a feeling I can't express. As far as making an official report, if any of these agencies were willing to take me seriously, I would gladly describe it to them. This is why I'm contacting you after I read your book and your blog. So I contacted the experiencer, and we discussed her encounter and abduction. Now, the more personal details were left out of the post. I will state that the abduction is still very fresh in the experiencer's mind, though she had begun to remember more details as time passed. This was not unusual for most experiencers. And many times, several decades can pass before the experiencer will realize what actually occurred. So maybe one day she'll get back to me and tell me what did occur. But it happens. In this next account, a group of girlfriends are at a club together and dancing. Now, as the witness was watching, her friend suddenly shapeshifted into a 7-foot tall reptilian being. Her dance partner also watched the transformation. So she states, I have reached the point where I can't keep this to myself and I need some place just to get this off my chest so I can move on. I was part of a trio of best friends. We would hang out socially regularly. One of our favorite things to do was to go to girls' nights out and have girls' nights out at local clubs. We always started at one of our least favorite clubs, but it had one of those inexpensive fishbowl drinks, so we typically began our evening there. This is where it happened. We had a ride, and we're about 30 or 45 minutes into a conversation and drinks, and we decided to hit the dance floor. Now, a group of 3 guys were seated near the dance floor and joined us once we started dancing. I was paired up with the youngest looking one. He looked about 5 or so years younger than I, but we were having a great time dancing together. We danced and merged back together with the entire group, forming a circle. Directly across from my dance partner and me was my friend. She was laughing and smiling, dancing and enjoying herself, and then boom. It was like a hologram or a shifting picture, like turning on or tuning into an image. She suddenly stood well over our heads. And the guy I was dancing with looked about 5'11" or so, and she had a clear head and shoulders over him. So this is the part that I have had the hardest time saying without ridiculing myself for not having an answer. Please, I have such a hard time saying it even to myself, but she was a reptile. Like a standing scale-covered muscular human-like creature with a dinosaur human-shaped head. My dance partner and I both froze. I felt struck just staring and willing myself to stop staring. I turned to look at him, and the color had drained from his face. I felt so bad for the fear on his face. Without a word to each other, we both stepped backward, turned, and fled outside. We kept walking, completely left the club. We didn't say a word, just walked off, left our friends there, and was gone. I went back inside because I thought it had to be the lighting, shadows, something practical after all. I knew this person, we were friends, best friends at the time. So am I the one who's crazy? I need to understand what had happened. I sat at a table near the dance floor and watched the whole room, the lighting, effects, shadows, and my friends dancing. And I just told myself it had to be an optical illusion, a terrifying one, but it couldn't have been real. I know this person. I'm not prone to fantasy, so I must have been the one to have my vision scrambled enough for my brain to fill in the wrong information. It unsettled me, so I decided not to continue the evening out. I said goodbye to the other friends who were with us, and I went home. As soon as I got home, I searched the internet for anyone who had experienced something remotely similar, and I didn't find anything. Now, at that point, I did try to continue to convince myself it was the room, the lights, the strobe effect, etc., that turned my friend into a 7-foot tall reptile person. I avoided him for a month after that. The next time I saw them, though, I thought she would find it pretty amusing that I ghosted everyone because she shapeshifted. She didn't find it amusing and seemed to worry about it. Asked me what she looked like. Fair enough. I thought if my lunatic friends said that's the same thing to me, I would have questions. I turned it into like a joke and tried to move the conversation away from it. But sometimes I get reminded and see it again in my mind, and I'm still as frightened and confused about it as I was then. We all grew apart after that. But there, I said it now, maybe just getting it out of my head will make the memory go away. Crazy stuff. So that's the last account. You guys got questions, put them up there, and Kevin will get them off to me. I do want to thank Mortal Clown for a donation. And Win Nyes had a donation early on, so I appreciate that as well. Okay, folks, what do you think? Oh, let's see. Secure fire. I believe I have encountered reptilian shapeshifters while in human form. They all seem to not tolerate the cold and will be dressed in warm clothes while in the warm climate. Think a parka at 95 degrees. That's interesting. You know, I get a lot of people tell me about people they think are lizard people, and I do. I mean, I get a lot of it. I mean, if I posted all the reptilian encounter reports that I've gotten, and a lot of them are pretty short, I think people would think I'm nuts. But then again, who knows? Other questions? Real truth. Any hints on your revised Fams and Monsters website? Been a reader since 2010 when you sent an email every time you had a news story. I can't wait. Well, I think it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks. I did find somebody to do the rebuild. I've got a whole team working on it. It's not going to be a cheap endeavor. I'm going to tell you that, but I do want to continue on the blog. I've been doing it for 20 years, so I do want to continue. So that's where we're at right now. But it's going to have some bells and whistles, so it's going to be different than before. Fakir Furt, any thoughts on David Icke? I don't really have much thoughts on David Icke. David Icke has asked me several times to do documentary with him. He got David Eckhart to do one for him, and wanted me to come on with him. In fact, they were going to fly me to Great Britain to do it, but I'll be honest with you, I just don't really buy into a lot of what David Icke's whole theories are on the reptilians. So I didn't do it. That was about 4 or 5 years ago. Shorter Cook, thank you very much for the donation. Dagnammit, do you think the lizard man from Escape or Swamp is still in the area? I don't know. First of all, did anybody read whose book? Lyle's book, Lyle Blackburn's book about that. He wrote it about 10 years ago. It was an excellent book. He and his wife now, his girlfriend at the time, they did some very interesting research. Christopher Davis, I think that was the boy who had the experience. But there were a lot of other experiences there as well. And there are still people swearing that Bishopville is still has the lizard man there. So I don't know. I don't know if it's still there or not, but it's an interesting story. Jose Sanchez, I once saw a documentary on the lizard beings, and there was a theory that maybe they could have developed from a lineage of smaller dinosaurs. Well, that's an interesting theory. I don't think I've ever heard that one before. But so, in other words, they think they're relics and that they developed from an actual bipedal lizard or some other type of lizard. I guess it's possible. So I don't know. I guess it's an interesting theory, though. Can Squatch, have you been contacted by or encountered the Men in Black? Not the Men in Black. I've had encounters with in 3 other instances with government folks, but as far as Men in Black or anything else associated with that, and I think Men in Black are probably extraterrestrials. I think they're the cleanup crew. But no, I've never experienced that. Talked to a lot of people who said they did, but I never experienced that. Magnus, I thought I saw a reptilian once while I was working. as I saw a blonde haired woman's eyes turn yellow and almost like a cat. She seemed strange and acted oddly. Have you heard of things like that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard many of these shape shifting stories in the past. It, y- it's pretty common actually. You wouldn't think so, but it is. I mean, for the simple fact that people talk about it as much as they do, uh, that these, you know, people just there's a lot of shape shifting reptilians out there who are among us as humans. I guess it's possible. I just don't really know. I buy into all that, but to each his own. Dagnabbit, any stories on the snallygaster, half bird, half reptile seen in Maryland? I did do a video about a year ago about that. I actually talked about dragons and snallygasters and other flying beings. If I get any more reports, I'll put one together. Sir Wolf, hi Lon. What's your opinion on reptilians? Didn't you say you RV'd yourself in the future and was one? There was one. Yeah, I had an encounter with something. I don't know what it was. Um, and short order cook knows it's an encounter I did with Irene. She's the woman who actually taught me remote viewing initially, and she sent me to a location off world. And I had an encounter with I don't know what the hell this thing was. It was big. It looked like a T Rex, but it wore a uniform. And when you're doing RVs, you're not supposed to be noticed by these things, but this thing was looking right at me, and she pulled me out of it. It's good she did because I don't know what would have happened. I don't know if I ever told Shorter Cook that or not because Shorter Cook is an RVer and we work together and we've done a lot of cases together. So maybe she has an opinion. Grandizer 12. Question line. When the topic about Superstition Mountains in Apache Junction, Arizona, some have said that they see reptilian humanoids there along with portals. What have you heard? I did an encounter report, a couple encounter reports about that. Yeah, Superstition Mountains are known for a possible reptilian base. Now, I had at least two witnesses who have had encounters outside of, off the mountain of these reptilians in the desert. So, yeah, I've had reports. Luckham the Spicy Lizard. 3 questions. Do you think you ever encountered a reptilian shapeshifter or interviewed those who made contact? Do you think they've been here longer than us? Example, the Naga. Any reports of talking dragons? Well, if you go, well, you have to go back. I don't have it open because the blog's down now, but if you know the case about David Eckhart, it's in my book. I did a whole chapter on it. He had several long going reptilian encounters, he and his family. And he's probably the only person that I know has had an extensive encounter with. And I have talked to others who have encounters with them. If you look at my book, Alien Disclosure: Experiences Exposed Reality, I do have some of those reports in there. Grandizer, question. Yes, Lon, what books, literature do you recommend for anyone to read about reptilian humanoids? Um, as far as particularly on reptilian humanoids, I can't name one offhand. If you want to get back to me and send me an email, I can send you some recommendations. Lon Strickler, famsmonsters.com. Shorter Cook wrote, oh my God, Lon. Yes, sometimes Irene sent us on some missions. I never knew about your encounter. I retrained me as well. I've had an encounter with a reptilian in an RV session. Yes, they can see you. Yeah, well, there you go. And I didn't know she did that as well. So we both learned something about each other tonight. That's interesting. Fakir Furt. There is a very hard to find YouTube video with a supposed interview with an Illuminati clone who talks in depth about the reptilian. I will post a link in your chat. Okay. Thank you. Grandizer. Question, Lon, do you remember the TV series V in the 1980s that showed the aliens were reptilian humanoids? Do you think there was an underlying message to that series? I did watch V. I watched it when it came out. Yeah, I'm that old. I don't know what to think of V. I thought it was pretty interesting at first. But yeah, they were reptilians. I mean, do I think there's some underlying message? I think a lot of movies, screenwrites, books, and stuff are indicative of people's past encounters. It's just like what we're experiencing, or people experienced with the next book we're writing, about the Glimmermen. Did somebody, a screenwriter, have an encounter with something similar to the Predator film, the Predator creature, Predator humanoid or alien, that it can mask or cloak itself? Possible. I've talked to people who swear that a lot of what they see in films and in pop culture are true. So I wouldn't discount it. Jose Sanchez, I think that mist of the sensational videos on people's pupils changing as they blink is a load of baloney. It's called special effects. Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, that's your opinion. I don't know if it is or not, but you're entitled to what you want to think. Davy Jones Locker, haven't heard from you in a while. Are you ready to experience what Eckhart has? The invite is probably still there. Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not really looking forward to having a reptilian encounter. Now, I tell you, when I did have my encounter back in 2015, David warned me that I was going to have the encounter and have the abduction. He warned me, and I was hoping to God it wasn't going to be reptilians. Fortunately, it was 3 tall grays. It wasn't reptilians. Now, I'm hoping I'm not cursing myself and I have a reptilian encounter tonight. I don't know. We'll see. Magnus, thoughts on the original Chupacabra in Puerto Rico being a reptilian figure? Well, some of the descriptions are reptilian-like. I don't know what those things are. I don't think they're of this world. Some of the reports I have read seem like it very well could be reptilian-like. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different descriptions, but most of the descriptions that come out of Puerto Rico are like a reptilian-like quadruped. Sometimes they're up bipedally, but most times they're quadrupeds. Grandizer question, Lon. It said that constant clearing of the throat and yawning is a reptilian feature that was passed down genetically. In your research, have you heard this as well? Confirm this. That one I've never heard. I have never heard that, but I will look into it. I'll see what I can find out. Jose Sanchez, do you think that the belief that these lizard people really live deep inside the earth? And if so, how far deep could they actually survive, being that earth magma is also there? I have had several reports from witnesses having encounters underground. The one in particular that I remember was a woman who lived in Indiana that was down in southern Indiana in a cavern. They were taking a tour, and she saw these small bipedal reptilians. Freaked her out. But there have been I've had other encounter reports as well. I've talked about the sighting that a geologist had a professor and geologist in Austria in a cave, and he was confronted by several reptilian beings. There was another one in Virginia, a spelunker who had an encounter. And I had another in the famous Carthage, Missouri story about the naval facility that was underground in one of the limestone caverns. That's a pretty famous one. Real truth. I've been listening to out-of-body music while I sleep and got out of my body once. Can you put something together to show how you go to places out of body? I don't think I've ever had an out-of-body experience. I know some people who say they have. I think I've got a few reports. I had to go into the archive and look, but if I can, I'll dig something up. Is that it, folks? Well, look, if you got more questions about tonight or anything else, join the Insiders, $2.99, and next Wednesday night at 9:00, we're going to have the Ask Lon Insiders chat. So if you want to ask me, then be there 9:00 again Wednesday night. You can find it on the YouTube channel or on Fams of Monsters Radio. Now, I want to thank each and all of you for watching and chatting, and if you donate, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes all this possible, so please like, subscribe, and share. If you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the personal report show or posted in Phantoms of Monsters when I finally get it back up, feel free to forward to my email, lonstrickler@phantomsofmonsters.com. So until we meet again, stay healthy, safe. Again, Wednesday night, if you can make it. Have a good night and have a safe weekend. Talk to you later.